Hi, I'm Isobel Daws and I'm here today with Denis Wick doing a little chat and interview to see everything about your life and find some more stories out. So Denis, can you tell me something about how you first started playing trombone, how you got into it with your family and everything?
Well, to me, as a small child, the trombone was a mystery. My father used to say, that would sound good on the trombone, boy. And I thought that was a kind of accolade to give to a piece of music, to say it must be good if it's going to be played on the trombone.
Yeah.
Well, my father was the band secretary of the local brass band, Braintree Town Silver Prize Band, it was
Wow.
called. And he was a very well organised sort of chap, and the band stopped playing, for what reason I don't remember, and he became the custodian of their instruments. And he built a very, very strong garden shed, and the garden shed was full of their instruments.
Oh wow.
And this was before the war, I suppose. I was born in Braintree, Essex, and my father worked for a builder's merchants, and they had a yard full of chimney pots and bricks and bits of timber and so on. They were called Johnson and Stratton.
Okay.
Well, at the beginning of the war, there was no building, so my father was literally out of work.
Right.
He didn't know what to do, so his elder brother, my Uncle Ted, worked for the Salvation Army, selling insurance.
Okay.
They called it assurance. I always remember that. So my father got a job with them, and we all became Salvationists overnight. And when we became Salvationists, I thought the trombone would be an instrument to play, because my father was always talking about it. And so they gave me a trombone,
Right.
which fell to bits.
Oh really?
So I didn't have a trombone. I had a trombone for about a week, and they sent it off. They've got their own repair factory in St Albans.
Yeah.
And so they sent my trombone to be repaired, and meanwhile my father, who was playing second baritone, let me play his instrument. And my first solo appearance was at school when I was 9½,
Oh.
playing the cornet part of the Bluebells of Scotland, just the tune, that's all.
Right.
After a little while, managed to play in bass clef, and went to school to play Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh wow.
And I remember the letter said, "Assist us in our production of Iolanthe,"
Right.
and opened a new door
Yeah.
to play bass clef.
Yeah, I remember when I started learning bass clef, it was so hard, and I didn't want to do it because it was like just such a complete different world to me.
Yes.
And then now still, I think everything in B flat still. And if I play any vowels or anything,
Yes.
even like when I go to play a G, I think it's an A still, and I don't think it will ever leave.
That's incredible.
It's amazing how it stays in, isn't
Yes,
it, from when you
yes.
start. I think it's the vowels.
Yes.
So how did you transition from playing at school to then playing professionally with your trombone?
Well, it was a big jump.
Mhm.
I had a telegram from the Bournemouth Municipal Orchestra conductor, Rudolf Schwarz, who was a wonderful musician, and he'd escaped within an inch of his life
Wow,
at the end of the war from Auschwitz.
that's amazing.
He was rescued by the Swedish Red Cross, and he married his nurse. All
Aw.
his family had been killed by the Nazis.
Right.
But so there he was, and he was in Göteborg, Gothenburg, in Sweden, and saw this advert for musical director of the Bournemouth Municipal Orchestra. So he went and conducted them, and they were amazed,
Oh wow.
because although
Yeah.
he couldn't lift his arms up, having had his shoulders broken by the Nazis,
Okay.
he was a wonderful musician. And he used to explain, and then at the end, in other words, and he would explain again.
Right, okay.
And for me, this is the most incredible education.
Yeah.
Because I listened to every word he said, and he was telling the third horn player, why for this accord you must play a little more.
Right.
And in the next one you come down.
Yeah.
And explaining the tiny detail of the balance in the section, and it was an education. I'd never come across anything like it.
And also trying to learn those things, especially as a second trombone player, it's really hard, isn't it, to know where you fit in the chord, and
Yes.
having to listen to someone telling you that must have been so useful.
It was incredible.
Wow.
Anyway, we were rehearsing in the Winter Gardens, which
Okay.
is I think it's made into the Bournemouth local authority turned it into a car park.
Yes.
They can make more money out of it. So I think it was one of the best concert halls I've ever come across.
Right.
It started off as an indoor bowling green. And I met Harold Greensmith, who was the first trombone in the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so we're having coffee. I said, how are you getting on with the Rudolf Schwarz? And the air turned blue.
Right.
He'd just been sacked.
Oh, right.
And so there was a job going as first trombone. So I ran all the way to the post office, and they had in those days what was called a letter card.
Okay.
So it cost, I think, 4p or something like that, when money really was money.
Yeah.
And I wrote to Rudolf Schwarz, Birmingham Town Hall, Birmingham.
Okay.
And the letter got there, and I was sent a telegram
Right.
to audition
Yeah.
for first trombone.
Do you remember what you had to play?
I do, actually. There was a scherzo for orchestra by Carl Orff.
Okay.
That was the test piece.
Right.
Ba 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 da 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 ba 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 bam bam ba ba C sharp major now ba 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 no, up and very high.
Oh, right, okay. Wow.
You see, I got used to sight reading because I had to transpose everything up a semitone.
Yeah.
I used to pull the instrument out into A,
Right.
and transpose everything into the sharp key. So if I was playing an A flat, it was A major.
Yeah.
But ordinary sight reading was an absolute doddle.
Okay.
So I belted out this thing
Yeah.
and got the job.
Wow.
Well, 2 weeks trial.
2 weeks trial.
And so there I was, at the age of 21, in an orchestra with a fantastic conductor and some extraordinarily bad players. It was a marvellous time for me, though, because playing first trombone in the CVSO, it was like magic. And having Schwarz to conduct, because he's such a fine musician.
And playing with other trombones so often must have been really nice to play with your section all the time.
Yes.
Oh.
Frank Matheson,
Yeah.
who came from Yorkshire, you know, and he talked like this. And I lived in Yorkshire when I was a lad.
Yeah.
And you know, we got on very well. And playing on the G bass trombone with a handle on it,
Yeah.
they used to call it the kid shifter, because the why it was in G, of all keys, I can't imagine what it was. And I think it was for the visual effect of this thing bouncing backwards and forwards. But the Schwarz was very kind to me, and he commissioned Gordon Jacob to write me a concerto. And I did the premiere of it with the Birmingham Orchestra.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, because that's such a staple piece in the trombone repertoire now.
Yeah,
like,
yes.
we're all still studying it at the academy and everything. It's
And it was marvellous for me. You know, it's fantastic. At the age of 21, to be given this piece to play, and then getting to play it.
Yeah, with your orchestra.
Yes.
And did you have any other pieces written for you?
Yes.
Did you have the Buxton War written for you?
Buxton Moore wrote
Yeah.
me a piece
Yeah.
for trombone and brass band.
Yeah, that's a great piece.
And there's another one as well.
Alan Hodinot.
Alan Hodinot, that's
Oh, yeah.
right.
So you
Alan
yeah.
wrote me a piece. Then we did a concert with the Schubert C Major Symphony, and there was a Canadian conductor called George Hurst
Okay.
who conducted it, and I realised that after taking his bows at his concert, he must have run all the way round the back of Birmingham Town Hall
Yeah.
and greeted the trombones as we came down the steps. Now, there had been a vacancy for first trombone in the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Okay.
I'd written in for it, and I hadn't even had an answer.
Okay. Wow.
So he said, the trombones were wonderful.
Oh.
I said, it's very kind of you. It's pity the LPO didn't think so. He was their assistant conductor.
Oh, okay.
You would play for us?
Oh,
I thought, well, that's why I applied for the job. So I got a telegram and telephone calls, and I went to an audition for the LPO,
Oh, right. Okay.
and they offered me the job.
Right. And then.
So then I had a telephone call from a fellow with a very, very deep voice, who was the general manager of the London Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah.
And I can't remember his name, but never mind. So I went to an audition for the LSO as well.
And then you obviously got offered that job
Yes.
as well.
And it was the most disorganised thing you could imagine.
Right.
Well, the LPO got their trombone section to work with me,
Okay.
and because they thought I was just a sort of concerto player. We
Right.
played all the Brahms symphonies and things like that just to prove that I could,
Right.
which of course is easy. There I had an offer of
To London.
the LSO and the LPO.
Wow.
I didn't know which one to choose.
Right. So how did you make your decision?
Well, Audrey Stephen's mother, she was wonderful. She said, "Look, go and talk to Uncle Rudy." She called him that, not me. Go and talk to Uncle Rudy.
Yeah.
So Schwartz said, "We knew you would leave, but the question is, where should you go?"
Yeah. Okay.
And he knew all the things that had happened. And the LSO had just had a revolution. All the best players had left and formed a new orchestra called the Symphonia of London,
Okay. Right.
amazingly, because they wanted to do the film work.
Okay.
And you can still see old films with music by the Symphonia of London. And you see the credits on the TV.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
So what had happened was that Schwartz had somehow managed to put together people that nobody had ever heard of, like Barry Tuckwell.
Right. Yeah.
He was first horn in the Bournemouth Orchestra,
Okay.
and Barry suggested me as first trombone.
Right. So then you all made your own.
So
Sections.
we all made our way to the LSO, and the rest is history.
So where did you first perform Mahler 3?
With Norman Dunbar in the Albert Hall, I think.
Was that with the LSO?
With the LSO, yeah.
And how did you find it?
Oh, marvellous.
Would you say it was one of your highlights?
Yes,
favourite piece, or-
absolutely.
Yeah. What did you particularly like about playing it?
Well, the fact that you were a sort of singer,
Yeah.
and instead of being an all-powerful singer, and having worked out how to open the back of the throat and make... Because I was self-taught,
Right.
and I had to figure out how to do everything. And I found the best way to do it and used it. And it gave me a marvellous feeling to be, as it were, a vocal soloist
Yeah.
in such a fantastic piece. And that was when Stuart Nusser said to me, "Don't get it right every time, they'll think it's easy."
That's good advice.
Did you enjoy Mahler 3?
Yeah, I really loved playing it. It was, we did it I did it with the Royal Academy of Music Symphony
Oh,
Orchestra,
yes,
in
yes.
the festival hall with Bitchkov conducting.
Yes.
And we did 10 days of rehearsals, which
Wonderful.
was the most I'll probably ever do on any
Yes.
piece. So I definitely know the piece really well. But you know, it was actually, I thought 10 days was going to be a bit like, I was not looking forward to all the rehearsals, but it really helped opening my sound for such a piece.
It's a wonderful piece of writing.
And it was really, really useful to open my sound out, which I haven't been able to just blow like that for 10 days straight. It was really, really useful.
Did you know my trick with the practice mute?
Yes, and I remember when I had a lesson with you like about 11 years ago, you taught me to bend over and breathe deeply, and my dad does that every day. I have to say I haven't done it every day, but my dad is obsessed with your breathing trick, and I remember the practice mute blowing really loudly to try and help opening sound out.
And I mean it's marvellous, and it really worked for me, and I used it successfully in teaching. It's marvellous for trombone players to have a piece of that quality to play.
Yeah. It was really interesting because my family came to watch, and I had said to my parents, like, this is like such a hard solo for trombone, it's like an amazing piece. And my dad was like, oh, it didn't seem like technically hard. But to people who aren't, so my dad played cornet, and to people who are used to hearing like technical pieces, they think, oh, well, it's just a few loud notes and then some quiet notes. I don't think it sounds as impressive as it feels, because it's obviously the notes are not that tricky, but actually playing the whole symphony and concentrating and trying to open your sound out and then play quietly is quite challenging at the same time.
But it's something that I always enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's a very enjoyable piece because of everyone else playing around you, and like the whole first movement is you. So you recorded Star Wars. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, we didn't know what it was. I mean, it was just manuscript paper arrived on the music stand.
So you just turned up to the session
and there it was. John Williams was conducted the orchestra.
Wow.
And we just got a new first trumpet.
Okay.
Now, for the first trombone player, the first trumpet is the most important job in the orchestra.
Yeah.
And this new guy, Maurice Murphy, had just arrived. And we played in Mexico City the week before.
Okay.
I think a couple of Brahms symphonies, not anything spectacular for trumpet.
Yeah.
But there he was, and there he played, and it was like magic.
Wow.
And to have this guy playing first trumpet, it's like heaven.
And I mean, everyone still now would listen back to that recording and think it was absolutely amazing. It's still amazing to listen to, and it's quite amazing hearing you saying that you just turned up, didn't know what it was, and sat next to Maurice Murphy and found it incredible, because everyone still looks up to all of those recordings.
But I mean, that's the way it was. It was 1M1.
Yeah. Wow. Couldn't patch.
and we played it through, and we were all absolutely knocked out with it.
Right. Okay. Was it a very different style to what you were used to playing in the orchestra?
We just played the way we always played.
Played it how you played it. Wow.
But it was Maurice that made the recording.
Yeah.
Having this wonderful first trumpet there.
Yeah. How long were you at the LSO for, and when did you leave?
I was there almost 31 years. Just over 30 years.
Okay.
And I had reformed the trombone section dramatically.
Right. So you have your first ever Denis Wick mouthpiece here.
Yes,
Can you tell me a little bit about how this came about?
Well, I found an old Salvation Army euphonium mouthpiece. It had the most perfect curve, but it had a terrible cut.
Right.
And I was told by our bass trombone player, Tony Thorpe, who was a character plus 100, an incredible man, that there was this firm called Cox who made mouthpieces. So I went to see them and showed them what I'd done, with this old Salvation Army euphonium
Right,
mouthpiece, and old Bill Cox said, "Yeah, all right. How many do you want?" So I said, "Oh, 3 or 4, something like that." "Oh no, expensive.
Right.
You might as well have 100."
Okay.
So I thought, what the hell are you going to do with 100
100
mouthpieces? But that's what happened.
Okay.
And no engineer can make 100 of anything. It's either 102 or 96. So we made our first mouthpiece.
Right.
And this was it.
Wow, so that was the very first one.
That's got the Salvation Army inside.
Okay.
And we made a cup, which was the rim rather, which was a kind of compromise. And I chose the rim I liked best.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put this rim on the old Salvation Army cup, and we made it fit, more or less, and there it was.
Wow. So what mouthpiece did you play on when you were playing professionally?
Well, I started off with this.
Okay.
And over the years I tried different ones, and I came back to this in the end.
Right. So what mouthpiece size is this mouthpiece that you played on?
Well, it's the current 4AL, but at that time we didn't know what to call it.
Okay.
So Bill Cox said, well, put a letter on it. So we put A on it.
Yeah.
He said, you can make 25 more now.
Yeah.
And it
Still works.
perfectly well.
So you got this mouthpiece made, you had quite a few made. So how did you go from that to then creating Denis Wick as the company?
Well, having made a 4AL, I realised it was a bit big for some people. And so we made a slightly smaller version. And then the last letter of the number referred to the fitting.
Okay.
So it's large, medium or small. And the euphoniums ended in M, because in those days euphoniums had a different fitting.
Right.
So we made a 4AM,
Okay.
which is like a 4AL but made to fit the
For
euphonium.
euphonium. Okay. That's interesting.
And then the S fitting was for small bore trombones.
Right, okay. I didn't know that at all.
But it's just logic.
Yeah.
And of course the majority of trombone players played on small instruments.
Yeah, sure. What mouthpiece would you say is the most popular that you were trying to make?
Well, the 6BS, I think, probably.
Okay. A little bit smaller for...
Just a little bit smaller.
Yeah. And that was a small bore mouthpiece?
Yes.
Right.
And it was very interesting that the 6BS became our most popular mouthpiece. But then there was a Scotsman played in the Salvation Army band at Hendon.
Okay, I went there when I was growing up in Hendon.
Right.
Yeah, grew up in Hendon.
He was a very good cornet player.
Tommy Wilson.
Tommy Wilson, that's right, yes. I introduced him to Boozes, and he helped them design the Sovereign
Oh, okay,
cornet,
wow. Yeah.
and helped me design my cornet mouthpieces.
Oh, okay, so you like worked together to make...
Yes.
That's really interesting.
We used to go on a Saturday morning
Right.
to the Cox factory,
Okay.
and we generally came up with something.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And the cornet mouthpieces became very, very popular. And people said there's this thing called 4 bars rest
Yeah.
that I had revolutionised the British brass band
Oh, wow.
by giving them deep mouthpieces.
Oh, okay.
And also by getting the Sovereign range of cornets from Boozes.
Wow. So how did you go from making trombone mouthpieces to making every mouthpiece? Did you start with the cornets and then move on to
Well, I
others?
thought there could be more cornets than trombones.
Yeah.
And so we started with the number 4 cornet,
Okay.
and then we made a shallow version of 4B,
Yeah.
and the 3C cornet has the same cup as the 3C trumpet,
Right. Okay.
so that if somebody doubled, they could use that.
Right.
And it just kept growing and growing.
Oh, wow. That's so amazing.
Then later on, Stephen Mead helped me with euphonium mouthpieces.
Yeah.
Um, and well, it just kept growing.
Yeah, I was playing when I was growing up. I played a heritage mouthpiece.
Oh yes.
That everyone always was like, "What is that?" They didn't really know why it was a flat rim, and I still don't really know what it did.
Well,
but it was
I'll
so
tell
good.
you what it was. My wife Anne comes from, well, she lived in Kent, and we actually went to a museum where I found some old instruments
Okay.
and old mouthpieces.
Right.
And there was one which looked like the perfect mouthpiece to me,
Yeah.
and it had very thin walls on the side of it, so it made it straight,
Yeah.
but very thin.
Right.
And the wall thickness of that mouthpiece is less than 1 millimetre.
Oh wow, that's really thin.
So it gives a tremendous response.
Yeah.
And having found this very responsive mouthpieces in this museum, I thought I must do this. And we thought about a name, and Heritage seemed a very good one.
Is that because it came from the museum and you
Yes.
thought, wow, that's really interesting to find out the name of it. So with mutes, what were mutes used for before you started making mutes? So obviously now mutes are used a lot in contemporary music and most symphonies, but so what were mutes before? Were they used
Well, they were
often?
all sharp.
Okay.
And there were some that, I mean, the low F sharp on cornet or trumpet was almost a quarter tone sharp.
Right, okay. So something needed to be done.
So it just needed to be done. So I just basically made them bigger.
Okay.
And just trial and error.
Yeah.
Well, I did a drawing, which I still got somewhere, of what I thought on graph paper of what would look like the best mute. It looked so good, and it looked as though it would work. So I went to see old Bill Cox. He said, "What you want is a metal spinner."
Okay.
I didn't know what a metal spinner was, but he put me in touch with a firm that did metal spinning, and they made my first mute.
Oh wow.
Finally got what I thought was the best result, and then made a larger one for the trombone.
Yeah.
Which I'd aimed at making it double the size, but it didn't quite work out. And it was just trial and error.
Right.
And
So how did your tenor trombone mutes come around?
well, started off as a sort of double size version of the trumpet one.
Right.
And then it wasn't, and then I changed a few bits here. It was all guesswork.
Okay.
And I was doing some recording with Benjamin Britten at Aldborough.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was very interested to know, and I was testing this trombone mute with various different other makes. And he took over the test proceedings.
Right.
And said, "This is the one."
Okay.
So that's how
how
that happened.
Oh wow! And then that's such a. I mean, everyone uses those mutes. It's amazing to see where it came from.
Yes.
Just trial and error. It's quite.
Yeah, it was all guesswork.
Oh wow. So how did the wooden mutes come around? How did you get those?
Well, I did a drawing of what I thought would be the best kind of the ideal shape for the trumpet and for the trombone. And in Hamburg, this Engerman chap that I'd forgotten about was actually a very fine craftsman. But I'd seen these wonderful wooden mutes in the museum, which and I based my designs on that design. And I think Engerman made them for me in the first place.
Right.
But it was a big jump.
Yeah.
Because I knew I understood the principle, but you had to get it right.
Yeah.
And I made the first one myself, and I've got the prototype in there, and it became a great success. And meanwhile, I was able to try them all out with the greatest conductors in the world, and get their opinions and advice.
And did you bring all the mutes and mouthpieces to your section in the LSO and have them help you decide what was good or not?
Yes.
It must have been quite a difference from just going from playing trombone in the army band and then suddenly making mouthpieces and mutes on a large scale.
Yes.
Must have been quite a jump for
yes,
for
but you know, it was a marvelous adventure.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it, and I particularly enjoyed making those mutes myself.
Right. Yeah. Learning it all and seeing what works for you and everything. You used to play Boozy and Hawk's trombone, and then you moved on to more Americanized trombones.
That's right, yes.
So how did that come about, and did you get your section to change with you, or was it just you to start with changing?
Well, I think when they realised how good the American instruments were, and I was bringing them in, you know, whenever we went to America.
Right, and that was about twice a year, did you
Yes.
say? Yeah.
And all my students got them, and word got out, and gradually other people wanted them, and then it became legal.
Right, so it was, you couldn't even import any instruments before.
Yes.
It's amazing because now you see everyone mainly plays cons now, and it's amazing to sit in front of the person who kind of brought them here. So that many years ago, it's amazing to see how quick things have changed as well.
Yes.
It's not.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with us. We heard the trombone section of the New York Philharmonic playing at the Edinburgh Festival.
Right. Okay.
I think it did Brahms 4, but they were the best playing I ever heard or could imagine.
Yeah.
And we modelled ourselves on those guys.
Okay.
Things have come a long way, and since I started teaching, everybody got the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
And the instruments have come along with us, and it's been a marvellous revolution, really.
Did you find that changing instrument and mouthpieces really changed the playing in the UK?
Yes.
Did you find it was the orchestral side, the sound had changed or anything?
Well, I mean, the sound was the key. The idea was that we should, well, make a sound at least as good as the Americans.
Right, so then you were just basing.
Which I think we did in the end.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been really, really interesting and fascinating to find out more about your life and your career.
Well, it's very flattering to be asked. I mean, it's the things I'd like to have done. I would have liked to have done more solos, but you know, the public appetite for trombone concertos is somewhat limited.
Yeah, it's not quite the high point in everyone's musical ideas, unfortunately.
But I know the things I really enjoyed doing. I'm playing for Philip Jones.
Yeah.
In his brass ensemble. I've got a recording of a trombone quartet broadcast that I did with a premiere of a new work by Ray Premro, which is something I really enjoyed.
Right.
And you know, there's odd little highlights in your life that you remember.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm grateful for people that continue to work for me, and only hope that we can progress it and continue to do more.
Yeah, and we all hope that we see more and more, because we all love everything you've been doing.